Hi, Ghost Addicts. Welcome to the show. Today we got a scary ghost story for you. And the story we're reading is a school story by M.R. James. Okay, so let's get started. Two men in a smoking room were talking of their private school days. Oh, at our school, said A, we had a ghost footmark on the staircase. Oh, what was it like? Oh, very unconvincing. Just the shape of the shoe alone, with the square toe. Can you imagine a square toe? My good grief, someone was trying to get one over us on us. Yep. If I remember right, the staircase was a stone one, and I've never heard of any story about the thing, so it just appears out of nowhere. That seems odd when you come to think of it. Why didn't somebody invent one? I wonder. No story? I mean, come on. Somebody at school should have made a funny story about it. Well, you can never tell with little boys. They have a mythology all of their own. There's a subject for you, by the way, the folklore of private schools. Oh, yes, private schools, Ivy schools, oh, the elite, the very cream de the cream, the creme de the crop. Oh, yeah. Yes, the crop is rather scanty, though, I imagine, if you were to investigate the cycle of ghost stories, for instance, which the boys at private schools tell each other, they would all turn out to be highly compressed versions of stories out of books. Oh, yes. Nowadays, the Strand and Pearsons and so on would be extensively drawn upon. No doubt they were born or thought of in my times. Let's see. I wonder if I can remember the staple ones that I was told. First, there was the house with the room. Oh, yeah, the big house with the room, in which a series of people insisting on passing at night, and each of them in the morning was found kneeling in the corner and had just time to say, I've seen it, and died. Wasn't that the house in Berkeley Square, old boy? I dare say it was. Then there was the man who heard a noise in the passage at night. He went out, opened his door, and saw someone crawling towards him on all fours, and his eye hanging out in his cheek. Oh, it was grimly gruesome. His eyes were hanging out of his cheek. Oh, ghastly. There was besides, let me think, yes, the room where a man was found dead in bed with a horseshoe mark on his forehead. Oh, good grief, a horseshoe mark on his forehead. You mean to tell me a horse came into his room? Oh, and the floor, did you know, under the bed, on the floor, was covered with marks of horseshoes also? How did the horse get under the bed? But I don't know why. Also, there was a lady who, unlocking her bedroom door in a strange house, heard a thin voice among the bed curtains say, Now we're shut in for the night, young lady. None of this had any explanation or sequel. I wonder if they still go on, those stories. Oh, good goodness. Likely enough, with additions from all those magazines, as I said. You've never heard it, did you, of a real ghost at a private school? Tell me, dear boy. I thought not. Nobody has that I ever came across. Hey, from the way in which you said that, I gathered that you have. Oh, I really don't know, but this is what was on my mind. It happened in my private school 30 odd years ago, and I haven't had any explanation of it, old boy. The school, I mean, was near London. It was established in a large and fairly old house, a great white building with very fine grounds around it, lots of greenery. There were large cedars in the garden, as there were so many of the older gardens in the Thames Valley, and ancient elms in the 3 or 4 fields which we use for our games. Yes, I can imagine. Score and goal, cricket, cricket, cricket. I think probably it was quite an attractive place, but boys seldom allowed that their school possesses any tolerable features. Oh, good gosh, today there's hardly any tolerable features left. I came to the school in September, soon after the year 1870, and among the boys who arrived on the same day was one whom I took to, a Highland boy, whom, let me just say, I will call McLeod. I needn't spend time in describing him. The main thing is that I got to know him very well. He was not an exceptional boy in any way, not particularly good at books or games, but he suited me. The school was a large one. There must have been from about 120 to 130 boys. There was a rule, and a so considerable staff of masters was required, and there were rather frequent changes among them. One term, perhaps it was in my third or fourth, a new master made his appearance. His name was Samson. He was tallish, stoutish, pale, with a black beard, and I think we liked him. He had traveled a good deal, and he had stories which amused us on our school walks. So then there was some contemplation amongst us to get within an earshot of him. Oh, those stories were great. And I remember too, I'd hardly thought of it since then, but he had a charm on his watch that attracted my attention one day, and he let me examine it, dear boy. It was, I suppose, a gold Byzantine coin. There was an effigy of some absurd emperor on the other side. Then the other side had been worn practically smooth down, I say, and he had cut on it rather barbarously with his initials. Can you believe it? GWS and a date of July 24, 1865. Yes, I can see it now. He told me he had picked it up in Constantinople. It was about the size of a florin, perhaps smaller. Well, this first odd thing that happened was this. Samson was doing Latin grammar with us. One of his favorite methods, perhaps is rather a good one, was to make us construct sentences out of our own heads to illustrate the rules he was trying to make us learn. Of course, that is a thing which gives a silly boy a chance of being impertinent. There are lots of school stories in which that happens, or anyhow, there might be. But Samson was too good of a disciplinarian for us to think of trying that on with him. Now, on this occasion, he was telling us how to express remembering in Latin, and he had ordered us each to make a sentence bringing in the verb mimini. I remember, well, most of us made up some ordinary sentence such as, I remember my father, or he remembered his book, or something equally uninteresting. And I dare say a good many put down memio librium mimi, and so forth. But the boy I mentioned, McLeod, was eventually thinking of something more elaborate than that. The rest of us wanted to have our sentences passed and get on to something else. So someone kicked him under the desk, and I, who was next to him, poked him and whispered to him to look sharp. But he didn't seem to attend. I looked at his paper and saw that he put down nothing at all. So I jogged him again harder with my foot before and upbraided him sharply for keeping us all waiting. That did have some effect. He started and seemed to wake up, and then very quickly he scribbled out a couple of lines on his paper and showed it up with the rest. As it was last, or nearly to last, to come in, and Samson had a good deal to say to the boy who had written Mimius Escosa Patro Pio, and the rest of it turned out that the clock struck 12 before he got to McLeod. So McLeod had to wait after to have his sentence corrected. There was nothing much going outside when I got out, so I waited for him to come. McLeod, he came very slowly when he arrived, and I guessed there had been some sort of mischief. Well, I said, what did you get? Oh, I don't know, said McLeod. Nothing much, but I think Samson's rather sick with me. Why did you show him up some rot? No fear, he said. It was all right as far as I could see. It was like this memento. That's right, enough for remember, and it takes a genitive. Memento piter de cuertos tactos. What silly rot, I said. What made you shove that down? What does that mean? That's the funny part, said McLeod. I'm quite not sure what it means. All I know is it just came into my head and I corked it down. I know what I think it means because just before I wrote it down, I had a sort of picture of it in my head. I believe it means remember the well among the four. What are those dark sort of trees that had red berries on them? Mountain ashes, I suppose you mean. I never heard of them, said McLeod. No, I tell you, use. Well, and what did Samson say? Why, he was jolly odd about it. When he read it, he got up and went to the mantelpiece and stopped quite a long time without saying anything, with his back to me, and then he turned around rather quiet. What do you suppose that means? I told him what I thought, only I couldn't remember the name of the silly tree, and then he wanted to know why I put it down. And I have to say something or other. And after that, he left off talking about it and asked me how long I'd been here and where my people live and things like that. And then I came away, but he wasn't looking a bit well. Oh, I don't remember any more that was said by either of us about this. Next day, McLeod took to his bed with a chill of something of the kind, and it was a week before he was in school again. And as much as a month went by without anything happening that was noticeable, whether or not Mr. Sampson was really startled as McLeod had thought, he didn't show it. I'm pretty sure, of course, now that there was something very curious in his past history, but I'm going to pretend that the boys were sharp enough to guess any such thing. Oh, my goodness. This is getting very interesting. Do tell me some more. Well, there was another instance of the same kind as the last one I told you about. Several times since they had to make up examples in school to illustrate different rules, but there were never been any row except when we did them wrong. At last there was a day when we were going to do these dismal things which people called conditional sentences, and we were told to make a conditional sentence expressing a future consequence. We did it, right or wrong, and showed our bits of paper, and Samson began looking through them once again. All at once, he got up and made some sort of odd noise with his throat and rushed out by a door that was just by his desk. We sat there for a minute or two, and then I suppose it was incorrect, but we went up, and I and other two students to look at the papers on his desk. Of course, I thought someone must have put down some nonsense or another, and Samson had gone off to report him. All the same time, I noticed that he hadn't taken out any of the papers with him when he ran out. Well, the top paper on the desk was written in red ink, which no one used, and it wasn't in anyone's hand who was in class. They all looked at it, McLeod and all, took their dying oaths that it wasn't their red ink. It wasn't their writings. Then I thought of counting the bits of paper, and of this I made quite certain that there was 17 bits of paper on the desk and 16 boys in the floor. Well, I bagged the extra paper and kept it, and I believe I have it now. And now you will want to know what was written on it? Well, it was simple enough and harmless enough, I should have said. Si tu non vernis ad me ego venan eti, which means, I suppose, if you don't come to me, I'll come to you. What? If you don't come to me, I'll come to you. Oh, goodness sakes, that's very odd. Could you show me the paper? Yes, I could, but there's another odd thing about it. That same afternoon, I took it out of my locker. I know for certain it was the same bit, for I had made a finger mark on it, and no single trace of writing of any kind was there on it. I kept it, as I said, and since that time, I've tried various experiments to see whether sympathetic ink or disappearing ink had been used, but absolutely without any result. So much for that. About half an hour, Samson looked in again, and he said he felt very unwell and told us we might go. He came rather gingerly to his desk and gave just one look at the utmost paper, and I suppose he thought he must have been dreaming. Anyhow, he asked no questions. That day was a half holiday, and the next day Samson was in school again, much as usual. That night, the third and last incident of my story happened. McLeod and I, had slept in a dormitory at right angles in the main building. Samson slept in the main building on the first floor. There was a very bright full moon at an hour which I can't tell exactly, but sometime between 1 and 2, I woke up by somebody shaking me. Yes, it was McLeod shaking me. In a nice state of mind he seemed to be in. Come on, he said. Come, there's a burglar getting in through Samson's window. Let's go, come on. As soon as I could speak, I said, well, why not call out and wake everybody up? Well, I mean, come on, I'm sleepy. No, he said, I'm not sure who it is. Don't make a row. Come and look, come on. Naturally, I came and looked, and naturally, there was no one there. I was cross enough and should have called McLeod plenty of names, only I couldn't tell why. It seemed to me that there was something wrong, intuitively wrong. Something that made me very glad I wasn't alone to face it. You know what I mean, old boy? We were still at the window looking out, and as soon as I could, I asked him, what did you hear, old boy? What did you see? Oh, I didn't hear anything at all, he said, but about 5 minutes before I woke you, I found myself looking out of this window here, and there was a man sitting or kneeling on Samson's windowsill, and looking in, I thought he was beckoning. What sort of man? Oh, I don't know, he said, but I can tell you one thing. He was beastly thin, And he looked at us. He was wet all over. And he said, looking around and whispers that we hardly liked to hear himself, I'm not at all sure that he was alive. Yeah, he looked, I hate to say it, like a dead man walking. Oh, goodness. We went on talking in whispers some time longer and eventually crept back to our little beds in the dormitory. No one else in the room woke or stirred the whole time. I believe we did sleep a bit afterwards, but we were very cheap next day. Oh, gosh. And the next day, Mr. Sampson was gone, not to be found. I believe no trace of him has ever come to light since. Can you believe it? He just simply vanished. And in thinking it over, one of the oddest things about it seemed to me the fact that neither McGlory or I ever mentioned what we had seen to any third person or whatever. Of course, no questions were to be asked on the subject, and if they had been, I'm inclined to believe that we could not have made any answer. We seemed unable to speak about it, which is so odd. Wow, my boy. Well, that is my story. The only approach to a ghost story connected with this school that I know, but still I think an approach to such a thing. Oh, the sequel to this may be perhaps reckoned highly conventional, but a sequel there is, and so must be produced. There has been more than one listener to this story, and in the latter part of that same year or the next, one such listener was staying at a country house in Ireland. One evening, this host turned over a drawer of full of odds and ends in the smoking room, suddenly put his hand up on a little box. Now, he said, you know about odd things. Tell me what this is. My little friend opened the little box and found it inside a little thin gold chain with a very odd object attached to it. He glanced at the object and took it off his spectacles to examine it more narrowly. What's the story of this little object on the gold chain? He said. Odd enough was the answer. You know the yew thicket in the shrubbery? Well, a year or two back, we were cleaning out the old well that used to be in the clearing here. And what do you suppose we found, old boy? Is it possible that you found a body? Ooh, said the visitor with a very feeling of nervousness. We did that. Excuse me. We did, old boy. We found a body. And ever since the word, do you know what else? We found two bodies. Oh, good heavens, no. Two bodies in the wells. Two. Was there anything to show how they got there? Was this thing found within this gold necklace? It was indeed. Amongst the rags of the clothes that were on one of the bodies, a bad business, whatever the story of it may have been. One body had the arms tied around the other. They must have been there 30 years or more, long enough before we came to this place. Oh, it's a shudder in sight. It's like one was maybe killing the other. You may judge we filled the well up very fast. Indeed, old boy, filling up the well. That's a good idea. Did you make anything of what was cut on that gold coin you have here? Let me see, I think it can, my friend said, holding up to the light. But it seems to be the initials GWS. July 24, 1865. Oh, I say. Oh, I say, this could wrap up the whole story with my friend, who's Teacher Samson, with the gold coin. Do you think? Let us know what you think. This is the conclusion of M.R. James, A School Story, a school ghost story. Do you have any cool ghost stories at your school or college or your house or anywhere? Let us know if you have a ghost story. And please hit the like and subscribe. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Storytime Fun. Thanks so much for listening. Give us 5 stars. And thank you for downloading the podcast. Enjoy.